Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. His Excellency, the representative of the Prime Minister of Kuwait, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to say thank you to the Kani Group for inviting me to this Gulf Leaders Summit and to talk about leading organization in a chaotic environment. I feel that at any one time, the world is in a state of chaos. It will be either more or less, but the world and our own country will not be very stable all the time. There will be a lot of upheavals, big and small, and this has to be dealt with. And therefore, it is very important to understand how to deal a chaotic situation. Now, I was trained as a doctor, and as a doctor, we have certain approach towards solving problem. That is towards identifying the disease the patient is suffering from, and having identified it, to prescribe remedies. It is the same with all other problems that we have to deal with in this world. And of course, when running a country, we are faced with many situations which require an approach that will lead us to finding a solution. Of course, when we are faced with chaos, the first thing we need to do, as with medicine, as with diseases, the first thing we need to do is, of course, to recognize the disease. And so we have to study what causes the chaos and what is the chaos all about. And if we manage to recognize the situation, then it will be possible for us to prescribe a remedy. This is my approach for the 22 years I was privileged to lead Malaysia. I had to solve very many problems, but there were problems before me which were solved by previous prime ministers. I would like to refer to one of them. When we became independent, there was an uprising among the Chinese communists. They had guerrilla groups who hide in the jungle. And in the Malaysian jungle, it's not possible for you to see them, because even if they are standing 5 feet away from you, you still cannot see them because of the very thick undergrowth. This, of course, is not known in Kuwait, but in Malaysia, the thick undergrowth is really very thick and prevents you from seeing somebody who's just 5 feet away. This was a great problem, as the population of Malaysia is made up almost 30% of people of Chinese origin, and since the guerrillas were mainly Chinese, there was a tendency for the Chinese members of the population to help them with money, with food, and a lot of other logistic aids. So we, of course, would fight. We would mount a military operation to fight against these guerrillas in the jungle. But that alone is not going to help us. We need to have the people, especially the people of Chinese origin, to help us fight against the guerrillas. And so we set out to win the hearts and minds of the people of Chinese origin in Malaysia. We studied their problem. We wanted to know what is it they are dissatisfied with, what are their needs so that the government can provide them, what are they afraid of, and how do we protect them. Protecting them is very important because they live on the fringes of the forest. And the guerrillas are in the forest. And they are afraid, they were afraid, if they do not help the guerrillas might actually attack them. And indeed, the guerrillas have captured some of these villages living near the forest and executed them. So they were very frightened of the guerrillas. At the same time, they were afraid of the government, because the government was unable to protect them from the guerrillas. So what we did was to resettle them away from the jungle and to provide protection for them so that they would never be threatened by the guerrillas anymore. We created new villages for them. We provided them with all the amenities. They were free to do business. They were free to farm, and all kinds of activities can be carried out, but within the confined area. Eventually, they realize that the government is friendly towards them, that the government is concerned about their sufferings, about their fears. And because they find that the government is friendly, they cease to help the guerrillas in the jungle. They denied the guerrillas food supply, money, and other logistics. And eventually, the guerrillas were isolated, and the military were able to fight against the guerrillas and defeat them. It took a long time. We had to fight against them until the year 1960, when they retreated from the Malaysian jungles into the Thai territories. So that was how we dealt with a chaotic situation, because we were just recently independent. We were independent in 1957, and we were faced with this problem of fighting a guerrilla war. And a guerrilla war is not easily defeated. I met Nelson Mandela after he was released from Robben Island, and he asked me, how do you defeat the guerrillas? In my books, guerrillas cannot be defeated. And I had to explain to him about winning the hearts and minds of the people so that the people would support the government and not the guerrillas. So that was how we solved one chaotic situation. And because the whole of Malaysia was declared white, that is to say they were free of guerrillas, we were able to focus on the development of the country. Now there is a second occasion where the country was threatened, and we had the task of diagnosing the problem, and we had to overcome the chaotic situation in this country. And this happened during the time when I was still Prime Minister in 1997, when the currency traders began to attack the Malaysian country, devaluing it until it was only half its value. In effect, this means that we became very poor. We became very poor, and we couldn't grow our country. We couldn't develop our country because we couldn't buy foreign goods, because foreign goods and components for our industries had become extremely costly in terms of our ringgit, our currency. We were suffering a lot, and many of our companies were on the verge of bankruptcy, and indeed some became bankrupt. And we were told that the best way to face this problem is to comply with the wishes of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF. We studied their solution, the solution that they proposed, and we concluded that if we follow them, then the country would suffer even more. We would become bankrupt. And then they would move in and take over the economy of our country. They would devalue our companies, our banks. They would buy the companies, these cheap companies, at fire sale prices. And then, of course, they will revive the economy. and then they made a lot of profit selling off the companies that they had bought at a very low price. So we thought that it is not wise, not right, and not beneficial to accept the solution proposed by the IMF and the World Bank. We had to find our own way. And to find our own way, we had to study the causes of the chaos, the causes of the devaluation of the country, the currency of the country. It is not because we were not clever enough to run our country, we were not good financially, we were not wise, we couldn't handle this modern economy, that we were just a new country with very little experience. We thought that since we grew our country very well before that, it couldn't be because we were so stupid. And we studied the proposal that they made, and we find that if we follow them, then the situation would become even worse. We would become very poor. And we watch what happens to other countries who followed them. Those who followed the recommendations of the IMF and the World Bank became almost bankrupt, and worse still, their economy and their finances came under the control of the IMF and the World Bank. They had no authority over their own currency or their own economy. But Malaysia had a very difficult problem because we were in the midst of restructuring our economy. This is because we have three different races living in Malaysia. We find that the Chinese are extremely rich, and the indigenous Malays were very poor, and therefore we started trying to improve the wealth of the Malays so that they can catch up with the Chinese. We have a policy of affirmative action to help the Malays improve their economy and have a fair share of the wealth of the country. If the running or the authority over the policy of the country is handed over to the World Bank or the IMF, they wouldn't care whether the Malays are poor, the Chinese are rich, whether what happens when there is conflict. All they care is to make money to pay any debts that we may have. So we feel that there is no choice for us to accept foreign authority over our economy. We have to find a solution for ourselves. And to find that solution, we had to understand what is the mechanism used by the currency traders to devalue our currency. We discovered, to our horror, they had no money. They had no money at all. We thought our money was flowing out of the country and being absorbed by these currency traders, but no. They had a way of trading through the banks, and they know that they can sell and buy among themselves. Each time they sell a lot of Malaysian currency, the ringgit, it will depreciate in value. As we all know, when there is oversupply, value of things depreciate. So they were selling money which they didn't have, and the currency was depreciating. Their hope was that when the currency depreciates, they can buy the cheap currency and deliver to the people they had sold at a higher price. This is short selling, as you know, which also happens with regard to shares in the stock market. So we decided that we will deny them access to our currency. We discovered that they were not actually handling cash. They were simply transferring ownership of the money in the account books of the banks from one person to another. When A buys from B, then B's shares or B's currency is transferred to A in the books of the banks. No money is involved. And if that is so, then we decided, supposing we stop them from doing this transfer in the books of the banks, we discovered, of course, that the banks are under the control of the Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Negara. So instruction was given to the central bank that no money may be transferred from A to B or from anyone to anyone unless, of course, it is for the purpose of buying things. If it is a mere transference of money because of the sales of the currency, then the banks will reject it. And when that order was given to all the banks operating in Malaysia, the currency traders found themselves unable to sell their money. If A sells to B, it will not be recognized, and the money that is sold remains with A, and B will get nothing. So the currency trading was stopped, and once the currency trading was stopped, then the currency traders were no longer able to devalue our currency through selling down, selling billions of ringgit down. Once that happens, of course, they had to stop, and the currency became stable. In addition to that, we decided that since our currency will not be allowed to trade, because trading would fix the value of the currency, since we cannot trade in the currency, then the government will fix the value of the currency. And we decided to fix the value of the currency at 3.8 per US dollar. Anybody who wants money or wants to buy US currency from the government will supply to them the US currency with which they may want to import certain goods. The government will exchange Malaysian ringgit 3.8 for each US dollar. On the other hand, if the companies earn US dollar, when it is brought into Malaysia, they have to deposit it with the bank, the central bank, and they will get the Malaysian currency equivalent of the money deposited with the bank, and that is at 3.8 to the US dollar. We guaranteed this, and we had enough savings. Malaysians save a lot. We save as much as 40% of the GDP every year. Our savings, the Employees Provident Fund, for example, today has over 100 billion Malaysian ringgit, equivalent to about 100 billion US dollar. We save in the country, so we had enough money. We had enough money to provide our importers with US dollar if they have to buy anything from outside, and if they earn US dollar, then they keep it with the banks. That way, we were able to save the economy of the country, and despite the chaos that was prevailing at that time, the retail business was down, the share market was down, everything was in a state of turmoil, but because we fixed the currency and guarantees that the currency would be exchanged at the rate we fix for any currency in the world, then the currency becomes very, very stable. And you know, when the currency is stable, it's easier to trade, it's easier to do business, it's easier to finance any projects that we have in the country. Now, these are two examples of how a chaotic situation was handled in Malaysia. For growth, a country needs to be stable. An unstable country, a country at war, will never be able to grow. We need peace and stability. For peace and stability, we have to ensure that our people have a good life. Whatever it is that they need that is reasonable, the government will provide. So the government provided the country with all the roads and railway and airports and ports and everything for people to do business so that they can make money for themselves. We don't believe in giving money to people. If they want money, they must work for the money, and we will give them an education, we'll give them training to acquire skills, we will teach them how to do business, and we will even support them with easy loans, etc. So that way, the country became very, very stable, and despite attempts to cause turmoil in the country, that was not successful. Both guerrilla warfare was not able to destabilize Malaysia, and the attacks by the currency traders also failed to destabilize Malaysia. That was how the leaders of Malaysia handled the problem of chaos within human society, within the society in Malaysia. But of course, we have to face chaos from other parts of the world. Today, the world has become very small, and anything happening in another part of the world will affect us. Malaysia is a trading nation. And we need peace in the world to do trade. And we find that some countries who are our trading partners are not stable. So what we did, of course, is to diversify. We trade with nearly 200 different countries in the world. We do not choose whatever system or ism that they have. Their ideology is not important to us. We want to be friends with everyone because only friends can make trading possible and easy. And so our market spread throughout the world. When there is a downturn in one area, last night I was talking to the minister from Qatar about diversifying your markets. Well, we did that too, and we made sure that if the European market is bad or the American market is bad, we have developed the Chinese market, the Japanese market, and therefore we are not too much affected by the chaos which assails the world. In fact, Malaysia, although we are very dependent on many imports from other countries, we are still growing at the rate of about 5% a year. And in these days, 5% growth is regarded as very good indeed. So that is how we handle a chaotic environment. And I think that it doesn't apply only to Malaysia. In most other countries, if they understand the causes of the chaos, they diagnose it properly, they identify it, then of course they can prescribe a remedy for it. I'm talking as a doctor because that's what I was trained as. I find that the problems of a patient getting sick is no different from the problem of a government or a country becoming sick. Know their disease, diagnose the disease, and prescribe the right medicine. I thank you.